Journey IFC strives to create safe spaces to worship God. Know that you are welcome just as you are, regardless of religious background or lack thereof, skin color, political affiliation, sexuality, age, culture, or any other label you own or society throws on you. You are welcomed and celebrated here just as you are.
Hello, I'm Susan. I'm doing your reading today. It is from Song of Songs 8, verses 6 through 7. Our reading comes from the book of love poetry called the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If one offered for love all the wealth of one's house, it would be utterly scorned.
Hey everyone, I get to sit today, which is more fun, I think. So, I want to introduce you to someone I love a lot. This is my wife, Skylar Naron, and I invited her to talk today not just because I love her, that is one reason, but also because Skylar is an LPC associate, a licensed professional counseling associate, and she's working under Claudia Thompson, is that her last name right? And at a place called Enhancing Intimacy. And so her specialty is in sex and relationship counseling. And I thought talking about love, I can kind of come from the biblical stuff. I can tell you about Song of Songs and all of that. But I thought it'd be more interesting if we could talk about what does that really look like and get her like on the ground, real lived experience of talking to couples and what this kind of looks like, or talking to individuals. At our practice, they work with both couples and individuals, exploring how to live into their sexuality, their lives, their bodies, their pleasure, all of that stuff. And so I just wanted to pick her brain on that a little bit. So yeah, thank you, Skylar.
Yay.
Yeah, glad to have you here. I have a couple of questions. Afterwards, we'll open up if you all have any questions. But my first question is, how were you led to the field of sex therapy?
I'll first say, hi, my name's Skylar, and I'm a journeyer. Yeah, so I think I can look back and see that there's been many breadcrumbs leading me to this place that I'm at now. In college, I was really interested in sex education reform. I really loved sociology and the study of gender and relationships, and sex is this thing that is constantly all around us. We see it in marketing, in media, in conversation. It's constantly talked about how we should be, how we should present. And there's also a subtle undertone that you should never talk about it. It's very inappropriate, it's dirty, keep it to yourself, keep it in your relationship. And that contradiction, I think, is really interesting and infuriating. And so kind of in the headspace, I'm interested there. Personally, in college, as you know, I had this amazing group of girlfriends, just amazing women. And throughout 4 years, myself, my friends, we got into these situations within sexual health where we were brought to this place of, oh no, what do we do? Am I gonna die? I'm in this alone, I'm so embarrassed. And in all of those situations, I remember saying, I don't know what to do, but I know exactly who we can call. And I called my mom every single time. She's amazing, she's a NICU nurse. And in all of those situations where we're like crying and so scared, she would meet us with, I see where you're coming from. It's gonna be okay. This stuff happens. And I think that sentence, that this stuff happens, immediately starts to diminish the shame that we feel that says, you're in this alone, this is all your fault, you're dirty, you're wrong. And it's a reminder that, oh yeah, we are gonna get through this. This stuff does happen. And then, there were this is what follows, this is how you handle this situation. But I think some part of me knew, I want to meet people in this place. I want to do this for people. I don't want people to be alone. And it took me many years to figure out how to do that. And I'm here now, doing that. So.
Yeah, and I know your background, but I'm curious, one of our questions here is, what is your background in regards to how sexuality has related to the church? Because I know that's an important part of your story. And so, yeah, could you share a little bit about that too?
So, I left college with this feeling of, I really want to help people. I want to bring good into the world. And I thought the best way to do that was to be a pastor. Like, that's it. That's how you help people. I got really involved in a big non-denominational church in college. And they hired me on in children's ministry, because as a woman, that's what I was there to do. And throughout about a year and a half of working there, I started seeing a lot of really ugly parts of church. They were really disappointing. It was really not what I wanted church to be. One of those things was I was working a lot with high school ministry with a group of young girls, and I was seeing how fear, shame, and guilt are instilled into these young people when we're talking about sex. And I was seeing in particular that the girls in ministry are getting a really particular message that you're a wilted flower, God will never give you a partner, no partner's ever going to want you, this is shameful, you're so wrong for doing this. And I just really didn't hear the boys getting that message. Now, in my work, I kind of see this issue being brought up in two different situations. One is a person who comes in and says, I'm married. This is supposed to be okay. Technically, this is okay now, but it feels wrong. It's painful. I'm scared. I'm hurting. But I'm supposed to do this. So I'm doing it, but it hurts and I'm scared. Or someone who has completely separated themselves from that belief, and yet that shame is so strong that it doesn't just exist in the sexual self, it exists in all parts of us and tells us that we are wrong. And it defeats any connection that could exist between the mind and the body. And so unfortunately, I face so often how the church is really letting people down in this area and creating really deep issues within a person.
I know we've been talking about doing this. We was like, well, this is intimidating. You don't hear this talked about in church settings, and it's uncomfortable because for some reason the church has taught us that this is something that is separate, as if this is a lesser love or a dirty love. And Eros is an interesting word, meaning love in the Greek. The passage we read is from the Song of Solomon, which is not Greek, so this word is not there. But it is basically a love poem between a couple. And it's highly erotic. It is very sexual. It is themes that are very sexual through the entire thing. You cannot ignore it. And so when the Bible was being brought together and canonized, it was a book of the Bible that was always contentious. People didn't know if it was okay to put in because it was highly sexualized. It's basically like erotica for the Bible, which, is a weird thing. You're reading through the Bible, then all of a sudden you get this weird love poetry. But it's this deep love, and it's between this couple, and it's kind of vague who it is. We don't know who they are. We just know it's a man and a woman who love each other very much. And oftentimes it's a physical love. And so Eros is often described as this kind of physical, carnal love, like the embodied act of love, sometimes in sex. But it's also beyond that. It's also love that's related to romance, intimacy, not just with partners, but also with the self or with friends and family. This is a love that's all about pleasure, what feels good to the body, which goes back to what Skylar was saying about we have this idea that if it's of the body, it's dirty, it's gross, it's bad. And I think that's what we want to try to talk about, is kind of reclaiming this love as not being a bad thing. This love is also seen in sexuality, in passion, in where your heart desires something, not just physical, like love or whatever. It's what you care about, what you are yearn for. That's this kind of love. And it's also, I read this part of a book by Catherine Keller, who's a process theologian, and she talked about Eros being creative love. It's the love that goes and seeks out. It's not a passive love. It's a very active, trying to engage. And she said that on the other end, agape love, God love, is the love that receives us. And so if Eros is what goes out, agape receives. And so you have to have both to be in true relationship with God, which you never think you have an erotic Eros relationship with God. That feels a little strange to us. But it is this creative love. It's what is imaginative. It's this fun. It's not the love we think of. It's the love that's unconscious that we just do and don't really even realize we're acting on it until we're doing it. Talking about Song of Songs, this history has been really back and forth where people are okay with it, not okay with it. And history has tried to make this very, erotic poem some kind of metaphor, allegory between the relationship between Christ and the church, where it's like, oh, it's not actually about making love. It's actually about Jesus and the church being in a relationship. And it takes away part of humanity, this idea that this is something that can happen, because I think moralism, Puritan stuff tried to get sex away. We hid it and put it in corners and said it's bad, especially if it's of a woman. It's very bad, and we hide it. We blame women. Look at the story of Adam and Eve. Sexuality is seen as a sin. The body, anything of the body, is seen as a sin. And so, we're going to play around with what does this kind of love look like? How can we reclaim this, even if it's not in a sexual way? What if it's just in how we live our lives? How can we engage in Eros? And so, Skylar, I know you work with a lot of couples who are trying to engage with, and a lot of individuals. I don't even think it's just couples. So I'm curious, what are some of the obstacles that prevent us from living into Eros or exploring this kind of realm of love?
Well, I think shame is a really big one. Again, I don't think shame exists in one part of us. It spreads into all of who we are. If we believe that we don't deserve to feel good, how are we going to receive that love from anyone else? I think we talk about pleasure. We were talking with friends last night, and they brought up this idea of like a guilty pleasure. That even when we talk about what makes us feel good, we're meant to feel like it's bad. We should feel bad for the things that make us feel good. I think in America, we're really focused on productivity. I get a lot of people saying, oh, I'll feel good once I meet this accomplishment, then I can celebrate myself. Once my to-do list is done, then I can feel good. And that to-do list will never be done. It will never be completed, and pleasure will always be at the end of that list. I hear a lot, self-love is selfish. That we're really taught that we have to always be giving out to our jobs, to other people. We need to be caring for other people. And if you stop to take care of yourself, then that's selfish. And I think that's really limiting. I think a really big one that's as deep as shame is the relationship we have with our body image, the way we see our bodies. If you have a hatred for the way your body looks, it's going to be really difficult to allow that body to receive feel-good sensation. I can say a lot about that, but I think that's big.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting thinking of like these obstacles. This is a love that we can always tap into, even as individuals, and there's all these things in the way. And it's easier to push it away because often church culture or this American seeing sex as a bad thing makes it easier to ignore those. We can put a lot of obstacles because that's what we're kind of expected to do. I'm curious, talking about culture, what does our culture say about sex that you want to help redefine in your work as a sex therapist, but also in getting trained to do sex education?
I think a really big one is how unrealistic our culture's standards of beauty are.
Yeah.
If you pay attention to the commercials that we're seeing, all of these products are getting us to try to strive for something that is unnatural within our bodies. Like teeth that are as white as paper, or bodies that are completely hairless. I mean, I could really go off on this concept, but like bodies that don't age. When we naturally age,
Right.
That's so natural, and we're so trained to prevent that.
Well, women are.
Women are, exactly. Yes, we are so against the concept of women aging and not being in this presentable body. It's a whole thing. Really disappointing. If we're always reaching for these unattainable targets, there's so much money to be made in the self-hatred we have towards our bodies. Someone who says, oh, my body is good as it is, there's very little profit to be made from that. So it's instilled in us to always want to change this. And that's just so limiting to pleasure. What I also think is fundamentally important is that we understand that our knowledge and understanding of bodies comes from the male perspective. That if we look all the way back to Darwin, to Freud, the father of psychology, he referred to women as little creatures that are not worth researching. Women have always been seen as less than. It was not until 1993 that it was federally mandated for women and minorities to be included in clinical research. And it was not until 2014 that the National Institute of Health required a gynecological branch to study the health of vulvas, vaginas, ovaries, and uteruses in their own right, not as they relate to reproduction. That's virtually the first time in 2014 that it was federally acknowledged that these organs are integral to women's health, regardless of if that person wants to have a baby. Women are seen as less than and are seen as what we can take from them instead of naturally as they are as a whole human. And that's not even including the vast lack of research in queer and gender minorities. We're missing over half the population in our understanding of bodies. And I'm getting really passionate about it, obviously. Because in my work, I'm stepping into a revolution of knowledge that women and people have been fighting for centuries. All of that information I just gave came from this book, Vagina Obscura, that looks at the history of female sexuality. Women have been fighting for us to have access to this knowledge at our fingertips for so long, and now we have it. There's so much power in knowing your body. If we believe that God created our bodies, we're honoring God by knowing the body we live in. And I just think that knowledge is really important.
So I know Christianity has done a lot to stigmatize sex and sexuality. That's an ongoing process in the church. The Big C Church, Universal Church, throughout history has done that. And I know in your work, specifically you and other counselors at your practice work with people who are going through religious sexual shame and trauma even. So I'm curious, how do you, in a practical sense, how are ways, besides going to counseling, which would be a good thing, that's also a thing we should do, how are ways that we can start to overcome these stigmas and the shame that we often hear from maybe churches or even just culture? How can we start that process? What are things that we can do in our lives to maybe re-engage with Eros?
I'm not going to talk about the damage the Big C Church has done. That's way more than we have time for. I think we as Journey are breaking this stigma right now as we're talking about it. We know that shame grows in dark, secretive places. And in the right light, it's really going to start to wither away. And Jacob, I think you do such a good job of creating space for us to have these difficult conversations, to have conversations that make us feel uncomfortable and we don't all agree. There's not a clear answer to any of this. I think Journey has kind of always existed in this way, that we can talk about difficult things. But just us talking about it, I think, is so important. Individually, I think it's important to understand that the church has this big message that you need to find someone to make you whole. That you need a partner to make life purpose, to give life purpose. I hear a lot, This is my better half.
Oh, yeah.
As if we're like puzzle pieces and not whole human beings. You have access to your pleasurable Eros self already. No person can give you the key to that. We are whole human beings. I think while we did not get to choose the shame that was instilled in us, we get to choose what shame we hold on to and what shame we weed the hell out of our garden. We get to choose. I think when you get to know your Eros or sexual self, as I might call it, I believe that self is separate from insecurity, from doubt, from inner criticism. I think inherently this self is very powerful. It's confident, it's creative, it's curious. When we're in touch with our sexual self, we know what feels good to the body and what does not feel good. So we can give enthusiastic consent and unapologetic no's.
Great.
I'm imagining how scary it must be to powers that seek to make us feel small and less than and agreeable for someone standing confidently in themselves saying, I don't need anyone else, anything else to make me feel whole or good or complete. I am capable and competent in myself because I was created this way. I was designed to experience pleasure. And that is a good thing. I don't need anyone else to give me access to that.
It's really interesting because I feel like the way that we know Eros is you hear erotic, that's the thing we hear, and at least my brain goes to like the kind of places on the side of the road that you pass have the big 3 X's up, and you think of dirty movies. We even call it dirty. We like give it these titles and we hide it away, and I think our modern understanding of what is erotic has perverted and what has always been Eros, which has been this natural existing thing that is good, that isn't dirty, that is part of who we are. And like you said, part of that is like what feels good to our bodies, you know? Like, I think Margaret said, we were talking about this week in particular, like, oh, I'll give someone a dessert and they'll say, oh, this is sinfully delicious. And she said, why do we think it's sinful to eat good food? You know, like, where did that come from? Why does our culture, what language do we put around that? Even when we talk about passion, like what is passionate, that word, the root there comes from suffering. Passion is to suffer. It's this longing for, it's like we have all this coded language that was put in to make us think that this is a bad thing. But really, Eros is about finding things that feel good to us, that aren't harmful to others, that can honor our body, honor other bodies. So I'm curious, I know, Skylar, you're starting a group on women's pleasure, which is a really cool thing, an opportunity for women to engage in. But how would you define pleasure? What does that mean?
Yeah, you might be able to tell in the way that I talk about it, that while I think the sexual side of this is important, I don't think pleasure is just connected to a sexual experience. I don't think it's just connected to a partnered experience. I think pleasure is this intentional, active appreciation for what's around you. I think outwardly, this is slowing down. This is breathing. This is paying attention to your body, to the sensations of your body. Inwardly, this is powerful. This is creative. This is playful. This is a spiritual place. You know, when we enter into pleasure, we're giving up a sense of control, I think, and that's really intimidating. But that presence is really a powerful spiritual place to enter in that is really meaningful with another person. But when you experience that with yourself first, I think that is where the real spiritual connection comes in. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, and that goes into the video we watched. Skylar actually suggests that breathing video of the, what was this? Forest bathing. And seeing that as a way of tapping into the Eros and just going and sitting in nature and doing what feels good to your body and remembering how you connect in breathing, being in touch with your breath. And I was like, wow, that's so simple. That's like, I can do that right now. And so one of my last questions is, what are some ways to embrace Eros, this type of passionate, intimate, creative love, desirous love? How can we embrace that in our daily lives?
I think you start by asking yourself, what is it that makes me feel most alive? What gives me the most happiness? When you were a kid, what made you so excited? Before you had all of this idea of expectation on yourself, of a goal-oriented self, what made you feel just like so filled with energy? Tap into that. I think outwardly with our environment, this kind of Eros daily is, when was the last time you took a hot shower and felt how good to your muscles a hot shower feels? And as we're going into the hot of Texas summer, how good a cold glass of water feels when you've been outside all day. How good air conditioning feels. Moving, walking, dancing. For me, swimming is an instant connection of pleasure. Anything that's going to bring you in this connection and presence with your body. Being in nature, I think, is huge. Imagining if your eyes were a microscope, how much detail can you notice in one leaf, in the bark of a tree? How zoomed in can you get? And inwardly, I think pleasure is a body state and a mental state. And so I think inwardly we need to assess, what is my relationship with myself? How am I talking to myself? Because I think, this Eros love is romantic, it is loving. If you notice that you're just saying unkind things to yourself that you would never say out loud to anyone else, that's really going to limit the pleasure that you are capable of receiving. If Eros is this infatuative love, what would it be like to look in the mirror and just feel completely infatuated with yourself? To feel so complete and whole within yourself? That's what I got on that.
That is all amazing stuff. So my last thing is just, do you have any final thoughts before we open up to questions? Any last words of wisdom that you want to share with us? I have to say, one thing you pointed out there that was interesting is, as kids, it was easier to tap into this kind of love. And why is it that as adults, society has somehow wired that out of us? It's and the things that are wiring that out of us, is that our voice or is that someone else's voice in our head? But sorry, now, what are your final thoughts? You just got me saying.
It's good. I have so much gratitude for this space and those of you who are here witnessing this conversation. I think I have a certain amount of comfort and callous in talking about this because I do it every day. But I know that this is really hard. This is uncomfortable. This isn't how we exist in the world, is talking so openly. So I really encourage, if this felt deeply uncomfortable, if this brought up any pain, I'm happy to be a listening ear, to connect you to resources that I have, in touch with the work that I do. I read a lot of great books. I'm happy to recommend books because I think so much of who I am now comes from the knowledge that I've pursued. Just have a lot of gratitude for y'all being here, and I'm looking forward to any questions or comments, thoughts y'all have on all of this.
First, let's go around with applause. I want to acknowledge that it's intimidating. You talk about thanking all of us for being vulnerable in this space, but I want to thank you for leading this conversation because I know it's hard, because you are going against a whole tsunami of culture throughout history that wouldn't let women come up and talk in churches, still don't let women talk in churches, and especially not talking about pleasure, their body, sex. She said the word vulva in a church, men would be freaking out. Whoa, what? And you're doing this, and having come from really oppressive religious backgrounds, I thank you for the gift that was this conversation. So thank you. I love you. Skylar pointed out this week that it says Christians in there, this is your call. And I meant to change it. And that doesn't feel journey. And so I was going to say we should change to journey, this is our call to love our neighbors as ourselves, for God loves all. Does that And if we get the words wrong, whatever, we'll probably mess it up too. So, love, 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 journey, this is our call to love our neighbors as ourselves. So, let us sing. Love, 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 journey, this is our call to love our neighbor as ourselves, for God loves all. Love, 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 journey, this is our call to love our neighbors as ourselves, for God loves us all, for God loves all. Journey, this is our call to love our neighbors as ourselves, for God loves us. One more time. For God loves all. Journey, this is our call to love our neighbors as ourselves, for God loves all. Journey, go in peace, knowing that there is nothing we can do to make God love us anymore, and there is nothing we can do to make God love us any less. So let us live into that truth and go in peace.
And have sex.
Amen.
Live into Eros. Amen.